forum with our fine candidates for select board. How this evening will work is that each candidate will have 3 minutes to give an introduction. They have then been given 3 questions in advance prior to this evening that they will answer. The first question they'll have 3 minutes to answer. The remaining 2 they'll have 2 minutes to answer. We will collect audience questions from you following their introductory remarks. So if you want to make sure that those are prepared, please make sure that there's only 1 question per card and there's 1 card per person. And then we'll sort through that and get those after the questions that they've been submitted in advance. Following all the audience questions, and each candidate will have 1 minute for closing remarks. So I think that we're all set, and we have a timekeeper here to make sure everyone knows where we're at.
30 seconds left, I'll give 1, and then at the end will be 2.
Okay. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll start to my left and work down, and as we move through the questions, we'll just move down to each candidate, so each candidate has a chance to answer the question first, and we'll rotate that way if that's agreeable. Okay, so we'll start here with Charlie.
Good evening, everyone. We are now moving into the summer months. My name is Charlie Konecki. I've been a lifetime resident of the town of Southampton. I've raised my family here. Actually, I think I went to 3rd grade in this room. So I am very familiar with our community. I've been involved with many activities in this community. I've raised my family and did the sporting events throughout this town. I coached soccer, Little League softball, that kind of stuff over the years. Basically, this is my community. I've been here, I enjoy it. I have volunteered for years to take and make this community better. I think we have a very shining star here in this valley, just looking at the rolling hills and the way we live. And I see a great potential in this community. I used to be on the Board of Health in this town. I moved on to helping the city of Easthampton, and then I moved on being the state district health officer. So for the last 18 years of that career, my job as the district officer was to assist many of the cities and towns in this valley, actually 100 of them, relative to public health events. With that, it's given me a great understanding of how local government works and how state government works. And I believe that the last 3 years I've demonstrated this being selectman, and I'd like to continue this.
Thanks very much, Charlie. We'll now move to Francine Tishman.
Okay. I first would like to start by thanking Margaret, Ray, and Art for their efforts in putting tonight together. And I want to thank the concerned citizens who are here tonight and those of you at home for your interest in our local government. My name's Francine Tishman. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, and by way of Long Island, moved to Southampton with my spouse, my mother, our dog Chloe, and 4 cats in 2008. The decision to move here came when we visited during New Year's. While others were retiring to warmer climates, I vividly remember saying I could learn to wear layers. We love the open space, the views, the small town appeal, and the reputation of the schools to ensure our investment. We found the perfect home, and within 6 months moved here. I do want to share my personal experience, though, with the police and ambulance service, probably not unlike your own. That middle of the night call and the quick and professional response when my mother had a stroke. I'm grateful for the care and the attention she received. I also want to mention the feeling of community that the library provided to my mother, the wonderful people who made her feel welcome and happy here in Southampton. Out of gratitude, I am now a member of the Cooley Dickinson Hospice Fundraising Commission. And now a little bit about my background and qualifications. I have a master's degree in speech pathology and experience in public school systems as a supervisor. I transitioned into nonprofit management with a consulting organization to UNICEF before moving into my 26-year career at a nonprofit organization for training and employment of people with disabilities. I advanced to and retired as the president of Abilities, Inc., and was responsible for a $16 million budget comparable to our town's budget. I have experience serving on boards of directors and was chair of 2 statewide boards in New York. Even though I retired from full-time employment in 2008, while living here in Southampton, I continued to work as a consultant to my former organization and held a half-time position with Cornell University. At about that same time is when I began my next and current career as a volunteer with the town of Southampton as an elected member of the Finance Committee. I have been a member of the Finance Committee for 6 years, and during that time was liaison to 3 other committees. I will go into greater detail about my work for the town in response to a later question. I believe that my collaborative style in both management and leadership will make me a valuable asset as a member on the Select Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francine. Now to Matt.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Margaret, for organizing this. Hello, my name is Matt Rowland. I was born in the Pioneer Valley, just over the border in Connecticut, and I've lived at 16 Mountain Road in Southampton with my wife and children just after the big snowstorm in 2011 that I'm sure you all remember. We plan to live out our lives here in this community and have already invested deeply in it. As some of you know, I work in healthcare. I work for a private company called Stryker Endoscopy and manage a large book of capital business in the surgical camera market. I'm in your ORs in this community every single day. I attended a small liberal arts college in Maine called Colby College. While at Colby, I double majored in economics and biology. I graduated summa cum laude and was selected into America's oldest and most prestigious academic honor society called Phi Beta Kappa. I believe that my education, work, and life experiences will lend themselves well for elected office. Lastly, since I've been in town, I have volunteered my time every season to coach youth athletics with my son and my daughter, namely the sports of basketball, soccer, and baseball. I plan to continue this long into the future as I enjoy developing the generation of tomorrow. My goal for the town is simple: establish and transparently execute a clear long-term strategy that allows for steady, balanced, and sustainable growth.
Thank you very much, Matt. And now to our last but not least candidate, George.
I just want to thank everybody, too, for coming, and thank you all for setting this up. My name's George Pluff. I grew up and was raised in Western Massachusetts and Pioneer Valley over in Amherst. I graduated from Holyoke Catholic High School and attended the United States Naval Academy after that. I served a couple years in the Navy, ended up coming back to Western Mass and finding my way to Southampton about 4 years ago with my wife, Liz. We love it here. It's a nice little town. It's not crowded like Easthampton, Northampton. We like the rural setting. Unfortunately, due to the jobs I've had, I've been working second shift mostly, so I haven't had the chance to get involved with town politics up until this point. Southampton is a great community that I see has a lot of potential. We're a rural community. We're not trying to get too overpopulated, too commercialized, but realistically, we have to look at our sustainability. I've worked in the military. I've worked in various youth organizations over the past number of years, from juvenile justice to residential homes. I now work with a nonprofit working with youth that have experienced foster care and have been adopted from such. I'm now a youth development coordinator, and working with kids is very often along the same lines of working with a town, because you have to address their ever-changing needs and also look towards their future and helping them become self-sustainable. Now that we have gotten to the point where we found permanency in our town administrator, I think the select board in this town can really look towards the future of this community. We really have to get back towards the master plan and looking at all the possibilities of where we can pull in revenue, save money, try to take the burden off the taxpayers. I'm committed to the long term in Southampton. I can easily see myself staying here for the rest of my life. I've made a lot of really great friends in this community of all ages, across all demographics. I'm really invested in the future of this community, and I hope that you guys are too.
Thanks very much. Now we'll move to the questions that the candidates received prior to tonight. So we'll start these questions, these set of questions with Francine, and then we'll move down from there. So I'll read the question first. If anyone needs me to repeat it as we go along, just let me know. The first question is, in recent months, the Southampton Select Board has discussed multiple opportunities and challenges, such as improving open space and roads, providing 24/7 emergency services, building a public safety complex, and the impact of the regional school agreement and funding, among others. How would you address these important town issues, and what skills do you bring to the discussion?
Thank you, Ray. Southampton is a multi-generational community requiring a continuum of services. I'm a strong believer in planning, being proactive rather than reactive. A prime example was the town's master plan, a copy of which I received from Hank Barton, which serves as a roadmap of where we want to go as a town and how we can get there. In 2013, at a cost of $75,000 and the investment of time of more than 200 residents, the plan identified most of the issues we are facing today. But planning isn't enough. It is my recommendation that we pull the plan from the shelf and revitalize the implementation committee to move those plans forward. The master plan lays out goals to protect the town's natural lands, its resources, its community character, its schools, and supports a variety of housing and service options to meet Southampton's evolving needs. I was happy to see that the Select Board at its last meeting established an ad hoc committee of concerned citizens regarding the acquisition of chapter properties to ensure more open and recreational space. Going back a few years, the town committed to a 24/7 paramedic emergency service to the state without having a financial plan in place of how it was going to pay for it. Again, with hindsight being 2020, and for all future similar situations, I would recommend that we study first, then develop a plan of how we're going to pay for things, and then make a commitment to avoid the complications we're now experiencing. Our police and fire personnel need to be in safe and functional facilities that are within the means of the town. An assessment of how much debt the residents are willing to take on is an important factor in getting people to buy into the new facility. Simultaneously, sale or repurposing of existing facilities in which they are housed need to be part of the decision-making process. One of the town's largest cost centers is the regional school district. I would recommend that we proactively engage our regional school committee before the budget process begins, rather than react once the committee presents its recommended budget. The quality of education is an essential component of the master plan, and ways to adequately fund Norris School are critical to the quality of life in Southampton. Our town must engage its state representatives to address the gap created by unfunded state mandates. In wrapping up, we have a capital improvement committee, but we don't have a long-term plan. I would request that each department establish a 3 to 5 year plan for the replacement of capital equipment and to identify building needs and repairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Francine. We'll move to Matt. Do you need me to repeat the question?
No, thanks.
Okay.
The skills that I bring to address big issues like the ones listed in the question are as follows. I have no pre-existing relationships or associations that will influence my decision-making ability in town. I am a neutral and unbiased and plan to make common sense decisions based on hard facts and data that can be transparently and easily conveyed to the Southampton community. I believe strong data rather than gut instinct and relationships should drive decision-making. This is how trust is built and how reasonable expectations for the future are set. This is how many major decisions are made in all of our homes, in the businesses that we work in, and should be the way that the government operates as well. In managing both personal and business decisions throughout my life, I've found that the answers to many questions can be derived from analyzing historical data and supported evidence. I believe that this is the best way to make clear, transparent decisions that are easily explained to the Southampton residents. Thank you.
Thanks very much. George.
Southampton is a community that is facing a lot of challenges right now. We are a very residential heavy community. We don't have a huge pool of businesses and industries to pull on revenue wise. So my main concern with the town is really looking forward to the future. You know, as Francine mentioned, she mentioned the master plan. It's really time to get back to that. The amount of parcels of land that the town can acquire are dwindling. There's only a finite amount of space in town, and we really need to maximize what we do with that to look towards the sustainability of our community. Bringing in new revenue sources is one of my biggest focuses, because at the rate we're going, we're going to get to the point where the taxpayers are going to be carrying the burden for everything. I mean, we're already facing a challenge this year where, you know, we're going to have to pass an override just to stay where we're at. Looking forward a couple years down the road, if we keep going the way we are, we're not going to have enough money. You know, also, as Francine mentioned, the education budget. You know, there's a state mandate that isn't being paid for by the Commonwealth, and there are gaps that we have to cover. Fortunately, that is trying to be sorted out by legislators at the moment, but we can't rely on that to come through at any point. So really looking into new avenues of what we can do to have savings, draw in new revenue. That's what we need to work together to do. Pulling in other boards and committees. The select board isn't going to be professionals and experts on every single issue that comes through. We have boards and committees of dedicated individuals in the community that want to be involved and want to be heard and want to spend their time helping us create a better future. You really have to tap into that. I'm really invested in hearing what you all have to say, hearing about what you want, what you need. You know, we want to remain a rural community and not, commit ourselves to anything that is going to stray us from our master plan, but we really have to come up with new ways of addressing the issues at hand, or else it's only going to get worse.
Thanks very much, George. And Charlie, did you need me to repeat the question?
No,
Okay.
I'm fine with the question. I have an unfair advantage. I've been selectman for 3 years now. So what I'd like to approach is we need to understand that each of these goals requires an understanding of process in government. Each one of these topics we're talking about has different approaches, different funding streams. We need to understand that. I've been working towards that to establish myself in a number of different outside arenas to find funding. I've been elected to the Pioneer Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization. This organization is an elected body of the region's heads, the mayors, select board members that vote on the allocation of funding to improve roadways in our communities. There are 14 voting members for this Pioneer Valley. I was elected to represent 17 communities. Southampton is one of them. An example of what this funding stream does for our community is the Safe Routes for Schools. That is all federal and state highway that was used funding to take and build that last year. We're presently looking to rebuild Glendale Road. Again, that is going to be paid for by state and federal dollars. The resurfacing you're presently seeing right now of College Highway. Again, that came out of that committee that I sit on as a voting member. Future plans, I've been able to lobby so that they're putting about $6 million aside for the construction of the Greenway in hopefully 2019-2020 budget lines. Also lobbying to take and put money aside for the reconstruction of East Street. And we were able to lobby $1 million grant for the reconstruction of that bridge so we can hold that money in abeyance until we can find the additional money to finish that. In the area of the public safety complex, I've been the chair of this committee for some 12 years. And it's been a long 12 years. Presently, I'm seeking support from Senator Humison, and he's filed a bill to provide state funding of $1 million to help us with design and construction. The purpose of that is to take the burden away from the taxpayer, try to get this money from the state to at least start this process. I've also kept an open line of communications with the new property owner of College Highway to try to make sure that we actually can move forward and build it in that site. And that looks extremely promising. I was able in the last year to secure money out of the state budget of $60,000 for the installation of an emergency generator at this town building. This is going to enhance our service to the community during times of emergencies. I've also worked with the select board in the past 3 years to purchase 3 police cruisers for our aging fleet, and purchase a new brush truck, moving on with an ambulance. The schools, we've been having very positive votes. The capital committee, which I sit on also, has moved to take and fund things that were necessary, things as simple as a boiler to locking doors.
Thank you very much. We'll move to the second question. We'll start with Matt on this one. The question is, have you ever held public office before? If so, please explain your experience in public office, including what you believe your contributions have been and how they have positively affected your town, city, or etc. If you have never served in public office, please explain any experiences you've had that could contribute to the select board and the town of Southampton.
Thank you. In my nearly 35 years on this earth, I have not yet served in public office, but I hope to have the opportunity to do so for this community in the near future. I believe my life experiences have prepared me for this role. I have used my energy and my talents and education to do as much good for the community as possible. I volunteer my time every season of the year to coach youth sports, as I hope to form the leaders of the generation that will follow mine. I volunteer my time as a member of the President's Council at my alma mater, Colby College. In this role, I help to secure philanthropic high-value gifts and donations to the college that help provide financial assistance to students who qualify. In my professional life, I am solely responsible for a large book of surgical capital business across Connecticut and Massachusetts. I balance these budgets, manage a profit and loss, and make difficult but data-driven decisions on a daily basis to succeed and deliver results in my profession. The decisions that I make in my career have a direct effect on patient outcomes in this area. Last but certainly not least, I try to be the best dad and husband I can be to my wife Jackie and my 2 young children, Ben and Rachel. I'm trying to live a life that each of them will be proud of and look up to. After all, perhaps I'm also trying to emulate my father, who served on a select board in a town close by for nearly 20 years of my childhood while I was growing up. I desire to give back and to try to make things better through honesty and transparency. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Move to George.
These are actually my first steps into town politics. Being only 30 years old and having the opportunity finally, I'm excited to move into this realm. My experience lies mostly being an officer in the Navy and working with youth in various capacities. Having been in the military for a number of years, the decisions you make, especially as an officer, you're in charge of those that are in your care. It can mean life and death, and you have to be able to make the best decision with what you have. You don't always have everything at your hands, and in a setting like this, you might not have the funds to do everything that you want to do on a moment's notice. You don't have the capital in the bank to buy Randall a new dump truck or whatever people may need at the time, but you have to make it work. And when you face adversity, in the sense of right now we're looking at a budget that's really strapping the town, you have to be able to come up with somehow, some way, no excuses of figuring it out. And that's where my experience lies. Working with youth, moving into the civilian sector, you know, youth programs are underfunded across the country, and as much notoriety and publicity as they get, they still remain underfunded. So you have to be able to serve these children and find ways for them to sustain themselves and teach them skills that are going to take them out into the community and provide for themselves. And the same thing as a select board to a town. You have to be able to provide things for the people in the community, and you're not always going to have everything handed to you. You're always not going to have an infinite bank account. You have to be able to go out, find the ways to make the community succeed.
Thanks very much. Move to Charlie.
I've had numerous public office positions in the town and with the Commonwealth. I've served on boards and commissions such as zoning, public safety, design of Labrie Field, ambulance billing, which, by the way, brought in new revenues to the town. Prior to that, we did not charge for our ambulance service, and now we depend on it for that service, the funding. Board of Health, obviously the Select Board, I've even held positions such as field driver. When someone's cow or horse got loose, I'd be called to go catch it. I was a volunteer fireman and EMT for this town for a number of years. I was on the master plan as the member at large, so I've gone through the whole process of that being developed. And presently, I'm appointed by the governor as a member of the Special Commission on Local and Regional Public Health as a representative of the workforce development, and we're overseeing the whole Commonwealth to determine where public health is going to be going in the next 10 years. And I'm also certified as a manager with the Commonwealth.
Okay, thank you. Francine.
Thank you. Turn it on. When I first joined the Finance Committee, it was through a write-in campaign since there was no one on the ballot for that annual election. I had such a great time that I ran for and was reelected to subsequent terms. Being on the Finance Committee provided me with an aerial view of the town departments, committees, and boards. As a member of the Finance Committee for years, we would meet with each department head during the budget process and had the opportunity to discuss and help plan for their financial challenges. Like the Select Board, the Finance Committee members serve as liaisons to numerous boards and committees in order to facilitate communication and to gather first-hand information on issues that impact the town. In that capacity, I rotated as liaison to the Norris School Committee, the Community Preservation Committee, and a voting member of the Personnel Policies and Procedures Board. I was also appointed to the Bylaws Advisory Committee, and I currently serve as treasurer of the Friends of the Southampton Council on Aging. Following my mother's passing in 2014, I joined the Friends of the Edwards Library and donated the computers in memory of my parents. As I mentioned in my introduction, I ran a nonprofit organization that went from $3 million to $16 million in revenue during my tenure, and I constantly worked to secure more money in order to maintain services. Like municipal government, we are committed to providing services within our means or finding ways to generate more income. It's important that the town maintain regular dialogue with our offices, with our elected representatives, in order to make them aware of our needs. Southampton is a member of several regional municipal government associations, and I would hope that our town could utilize their expertise to obtain additional funds.
Thanks very much, Francine. And the last question that they were given in advance will start at the end here with George. And the question is, the duties of select board members can easily require 12 to 20 hours of your commitment per week. Are you available and committed to the time required to be an involved member?
Thank you. I am absolutely committed to this office. It's not a light thing that anyone should take. And I did a lot of homework on what it would take to do this position. And I'm very fortunate to have a great employer that promotes civic duty and civic involvement at all possibilities. And I have the luxury of having the flexibility to be here whenever needed, whether it be 12, 20 hours all week. If we need to really get things done, we can make it happen. But I'm really here involved and invested in this town.
Great, thank you. Charlie?
Simple answer is yes. I've been retired for the last 3 years now. I have a small consulting business where I provide assistance to many of the surrounding communities with public health issues. And I've always made myself available, especially in the last 3 years, to the residents as well as the staff of the town. I fully recognize that this is like a 20-hour-a-week position minimum to be selectman. And I've been chair for the last 2 years now, which compounds the amount of time that one puts into. And these times are not just evening meetings. There's a lot of activity that goes on during the daytime hours that you have to go to events or you have to take and do lobbying and stuff. And I recognize that, and I'm fine with it.
Thanks very much. And Francine?
Thank you. I believe that I've already demonstrated both my willingness and ability to commit to whatever time is needed to do the town's business. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me if I worked here in Town Hall. That's how much time I spend here. In previous years during budget season, the Finance Committee would meet at least twice a week in addition to our liaison responsibilities. While I don't know everything about all of the demands placed on members of the Select Board, I will make myself available to listen to the needs of the residents of Southampton. I am confident that I can meet the time requirements to get the job done. I will also commit to prepare for Select Board meetings, as you can see from my preparation tonight, and participate in at least 90% of those meetings. I understand that in addition to the Select Board meetings, I will have to participate as a liaison to other committees and boards. That's something I've demonstrated as a Finance Committee liaison. While I never calculated the time, with certainty I can say that whatever the demands are, I am up to the challenge.
Thanks very much. Now we'll move to the audience questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to skip you. I misplaced my tracking, sorry.
All right. Many members of the audience and various town boards already know that I did my due diligence prior to committing to pursue the selected position. If I commit to doing something, I will do it full force. Otherwise, I won't do it at all. I'm fully committed to the responsibilities of the Select Board. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and I can't wait to get started. Thank you.
Thanks. Apologize for that.
It's all right.
Now we'll move to the audience questions.
Okay, most of the questions I received was about the budget, so I feel like that's going to be very thoroughly handled. I would propose if there's anyone else wants to write down a question about another topic, if we could just take a minute and let folks do that, just so we get a little bit of variety, and it will be helpful for all of us. There's cards over here.
They were given a tip-off about the budget. Okay, we have some audience questions. And again, we'll start on my left here with Charlie and work our way down so each person gets a chance to answer the question first. We'll ask the same question of each of the candidates as we did earlier. And each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the questions that were submitted from the audience. So first we start with Charlie again. What experience do you have managing budgets, particularly large budgets?
For 10 years, I served as the district health officer for Eastern Franklin Health District, which meant that I oversaw the operational budget of that health district, which required a number of towns to pay into it, much like a school district, and I ran that for some time. I also own and operate Twin Orchard Farm, which is a 140-acre horse farm in town, which obviously has its own operational budgets. So I have been involved in that, plus being on the select board, I've been inundated with the town budget for the last 3 years.
Okay, thank you. Francine, if you need me to read the question again, just let me know.
No, I think I have it. Thank you. Actually, I would say most of my professional life was devoted to budgets and managing them. As the head of any organization, you have a responsibility to the people you serve as customers and clients, and to the people that you employ. And there wasn't a day that I didn't think about the fact that those 160 people, if I didn't, ensure that the money was coming in and that it was well managed, wouldn't have jobs, and families and lives would be disrupted. I take the budgeting process very seriously. I think I'm very fiscally conservative. And I would handle the town's money as if it were my own. And that's an assurance that I can give you. Thank you.
Thanks, Francine. Matt.
Yes, so for the last 10 years of my professional life, I've worked in healthcare in various different roles, mostly in sales. And in all of those roles, I've had to manage a budget on a yearly basis of various different sizes. Most recently, the budgets that we're managing now are in the millions of dollar range, which are in line with the town's budget. We're also managing profit and loss statements as well, given the company that I work for. Personally, I've also, in the last several months, dug in quite a bit to the town's budget, and so I've been looking at it with the help of the members of the various committees to try to decipher it, understand it a bit better. I've gone through it in multiple Excel variations, just like I've done in my professional life, and I feel like I'm very versed in this. I'm a mathematical mind for sure, and I'm looking forward to drilling into these things as it progresses.
Thanks. George?
My professional career between the military and working with youth in various capacities, I have managed budgets. I will honestly say nothing to the level of this town. I'm not one to jump to rash decisions with money, however. That's not something I would ever do, especially with the money of so many other people. I would look towards our finance committee. I think that at times they can be underused. They should be consulted in a lot more matters, because I think there is a good group of people that, despite their personal preferences and opinions on things, they do make very sound decisions as a group. They do advise against things that maybe some majority of people in the town would like to do, wouldn't like to do. They do make the right financial and fiscal decisions for the town, and I would look to them when I'm in this role.
Thanks very much. So the next question, we start with Francine. Do you feel the town should continue to try and pass overrides, 2.5 prop, or is it time to right-size our budget and work within the funds we have?
Okay. I believe that passing the override budget would be resetting the clock for the town. We have accumulated, we didn't get in this position in just the past year. It's been an accumulation of overstretching the whatever available funds that we had. If you think that utilities on average go up 11% a year, and yet the revenue based on our tax income, which is the majority of the town's money, comes in at 2.5%. So we have accumulated the costs have outweighed our income. So I think at this point in time, and I, believe me, if the town votes not to pass the override, we will figure out a way creatively to make do. But certainly, I think without a lot of pain and suffering, it's time to reset the clock. And during this next year, if the override does pass, I make a commitment that we will find a way to manage within that budget going forward so that next year and the year after that, we're not coming back to the town and asking for more money. But it's like each of you managing your own budgets. If you've worked 6, 10, 12 years and you never got a raise and all of your expenses went up, you couldn't do it. It's not something that we choose to do. It's something that we have to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Francine. Matt?
I agree with a lot of the things that Francine said. I think that having looked at some of the history of the town, I know that we have frequently asked for overrides. Many of you know that I've spent a great deal of time trying to educate people on the current status of the town and the departments and this current override. I firmly believe that this is the year to reset the clock. The town does need a reset in terms of its money and finances, and this is the year for it. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of education, a lot of facts that various people have put together in town on these topics. If you care to educate yourself, we have a lot of these things available and can easily get them to you. But like Francine, I mean, the town going forward needs to manage its finances like we do in our own homes. I am a fiscally conservative individual at heart, and I like most of you, you can't overspend your money that you have at your own house, so therefore you can't do it in your own government. With that being said, though, the government's a little bit of a different animal in that, you know, a lot of our budget in some ways, comes from the state, and if state pulls back some of their funds, it comes from the taxpayers to try to prop up some of these services. This is basically what's happening across many of the town departments this year, and is the main reason why this override is being asked for this year. Do I believe in doing this every single year? Absolutely not. However, I think that a reset every now and then is required, and I believe that this year is the year for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Move to George.
Not to completely echo on what both of them have said, I think everybody up here is really on board with the override this year. Personally, I do think it's the right thing to do this year. Going forward as a continual measure, absolutely not. Putting that kind of tax burden on the people of this community just isn't realistic in the long run. However, there are a lot of things that we need to look into and look closer at to tighten the budget a little bit, make sure that we are financially responsible going forward in the future, because we can't just come back to a point where this is the only option again. I don't want to hear that again 5 years down the road. Oh, this is the only option. We need a reset. Yes, this year at this point, we could vote no. We could vote yes. It's really what you're comfortable with. If you want to stay as is, you have to pass it. If you don't, if you're willing to lose a lot of things that you're probably very accustomed and don't think about having it on a day-to-day basis, like Matt said, there are ways to educate yourself before next week. There are a lot of things that we would lose as a town and a community if this doesn't pass. But like I said earlier, going forward, this is not a continual process that we have to repeat. You know, we've all talked about there are things that we can do. There are revenue streams that we need to look into. There's money out there. There's money out there. We just need to find it. We need to go get it, because we're going to be a community that just relies on overrides if we continue in the fashion we are.
Thank you. Charlie?
Well, being the last one, I agree with everything that's been said. That made it simple for me. We really need to set the clock and get this started again, keep moving. No, I'm not in favor of doing an override after this one, but this one must pass. If you notice by the last 3 years of what I've been working on is soft money to try to bring in stuff into the town, but you still need to have the core government operating, and the core government operation is based on your budget. This needs to happen this year.
Thanks very much. We'll move the next question. We'll start with Matt. Have you consistently voted in previous elections, and why or why not?
Yes, so I registered to vote rather recently, in fact, and the reason for that is I actually had to hold a driver's license in the state of Connecticut for my job for many years, despite living and owning a home in town. However, in recent elections, the last two, I have been able to vote in them. Was that the rest of the question?
Yeah. Have you consistently voted, and why or why not?
Yep.
George?
I have consistently voted. I've only been here for a couple of years, obviously, at this point, so I haven't been able to have a long-standing history with the town and voting, but it's everyone's civic duty. One of my big things is to really see more people come vote. I think a lot of people don't come to the town meeting and then show up at the polls, but there's still a good chunk of people that don't come and vote at all. I think educating everybody on what goes on in the town and how things are going to affect them if they don't get out and let their voices be heard. I'm a big proponent of hearing everyone's voice and taking in everyone's ideas and moving forward with that. And I think everybody needs to have their voice heard and needs to come out and vote.
Thanks. Charlie?
I'm very proud to say that in 40 years of being allowed to vote, I cannot recall not voting in any election in this community. I've always been involved in this town and always voted and tried to be at every town meeting that I possibly could be on. And you can actually look at town reports and see my name way back when doing stuff in the town. So, yeah, I've been doing this forever.
Thanks. Francine?
Yes. I can honestly say that I have voted in each and every election since we've moved here. To me, voting is a responsibility. If we want to make our voice heard in this town, you do it at the ballot box. The only way I found my way to town hall the first time was on election day. I needed directions to go when we used to vote at what is now the police station. So yes, I think I would love to see the percentage of people turning out for these elections, to far surpass what they are these days. And I'm hoping that with the interest in the select board composition this year, that we will in fact see more people voting next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thanks very much. The next question will start with George. It's been stated that a sewer system is not possible in town. What other means can we use to attract commercial business?
That's a really tough one because obviously with commercial and industrial services, they're looking for the infrastructure to be there. We really have to look into what businesses we want to attract, what space we have available for specific businesses and industrial sites, and see what their needs really are going to be. Having a sewer system can be a big challenge to overcome. We need to look at possible ways to meet in the middle with certain businesses. We don't have a high commercial and business tax rate, commercial and industrial tax rate, so we can lure businesses to town, but like I said earlier in the night, we don't have a lot of commercial space available. We have to look at our own infrastructure moving forward, and like we all talked about earlier, the master plan, we have to get back to that and look forward to what's actually possible and what we can do to bring that type of revenue to the town.
Thanks. Move to Charlie.
You want to repeat that question?
Sure. It's been stated that a sewer system is not possible in town. What other means can we use to attract commercial business?
I, first of all, want everyone to understand that back in the 70s and 80s, we did a comprehensive study of sewers in this town. And I also hold a license in soils and septic and everything else. And there is the possibility of putting package plants in this town that do not require connections to municipal sewer lines for groundwater discharge. So there is the potential to create commercial operations in limited sizes, in limited areas. If you think that the sewage discharge is the only prohibited factor, you're incorrect. There needs to be much more environmentally impact studies done to determine soil classifications, volumes of water being discharged, types of materials being discharged, to be able to enhance any type of industrial, commercial operation in town. And when you look at commercial operations, and you're looking at office spaces and stuff, you're looking at just conventional sewage disposal. It seems like when people talk sewer, they think they're discharging some type of corrosive material. There's plenty of businesses out there that do not discharge anything that needs the dilution of a sewer line. Sorry, used to do this for a living.
Oh, okay. Francine?
Okay. I'll say what he said. He did a great job. My understanding was what the question posed, that it wasn't possible, and I'm happy to hear that there is potential to have a sewer system in town of some magnitude that we could attract perhaps smaller businesses, not large industrials. But in the meantime, I don't know what the potential is for more development of hookups in the area that can hook up to the Easthampton sewer system or the Westfield sewer system. But that would be something that, in the interim, while we're building our other capacity, perhaps we can be looking at. Thank you.
Thanks, Francine. Matt?
So Charlie's obviously a breadth of wealth of knowledge on this particular subject. So I do believe in some of the things that he said. However, with that being said, with regard to my own opinion on this, I think that this has to bring up a clear thing that you should know about me. I don't pretend to know everything about everything, and I will firmly listen to facts and figures and the citizens of this community in trying to make decisions. This is one of these topics that, frankly, I don't know anything about. I've actually heard it both ways. We can have a sewer. We can't have a sewer. So which is it? We've referenced some data from decades ago. In some of the conversation that we had during this hour and a half that we've been going on so far, I did mention that I'd like to base a lot of the decisions that are made in town on facts, figures, and good concrete evidence. That's the only way to transparently to run a town, to run a government, to run a home. And I think we should take a look at this. Let's figure out whether or not we can do this in an economical type of way, and whether or not it would make sense for the town to do so. I do agree with Charlie that there are numerous businesses that don't necessarily require a sewer in town, and we should absolutely investigate those. Perhaps that's the path of least resistance. However, if we deem that we can have a sewer and it is financially feasible and fiscally responsible to do so, then I think we should look at that, and I think we should just resurrect the topic, gather some facts and figures from some independent sources, and not necessarily just rely on what we think or what we've heard or things that have happened so long ago that it's hard to even know what the truth is of the matter at this point.
Thank you. So the next question will start again here with Charlie. If you do not have knowledge or experience in a particular topic, how would you approach the topic and decision-making process? Would you hesitate and say, I do not know, but, or I will find out facts?
If we're talking about at a selectmen's meeting and being asked directly, it would be basically taking the question and advising people we're not clear on the topic, the subject matter, and research it. And then move into whatever arena that is to do that research. One does never shoot from the hip sitting at this board trying to anticipate what people are looking for as an answer without some types of substance to back you.
I realize that I just asked the last question without turning my microphone on, so for the folks who are watching, I'm going to repeat the question. If you do not have the knowledge or experience in a particular topic, how would you approach the topic and decision-making process? Would you hesitate and say, I do not know, but, or I will find out facts?
Okay. Thank you. That's something that I've thought a lot about and that we've had some experience with, being on the Finance Committee and having to interface with a lot of the other committees and boards here in town. I realize how much talent, intellect, expertise that is already out there in our community of people who are volunteering. And so, as far as my decision-making process, it would always be to go to those committees if it were a related subject and get their input. I don't claim sitting here, and I won't claim sitting here, that I'm knowledgeable of everything. But you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with, and from what I've seen, we have some pretty expert people that I feel very comfortable going to for advice to help me make the right decision for this town. Thank you.
Thanks, Francine. Matt?
So I kind of touched on this on my last response, but to expand on this a little bit, my profession, I'm in sales, which most people would think is an opportunity to essentially, avert the truth, if you will. However, I've actually made a very good living on the truth, and I believe that the relationships that I've formed with surgeons and doctors in the operating rooms in our community here, the reason why I feel like I've been successful at my profession is because I have been unbelievably honest with them, almost to the point of disappointing them to some degree. With that being said, I get questions daily in high-stress situations about how do I do something, how do I fix this, how can I make this better? And if I don't know the answer, sometimes I do, but if I don't, I get the answer quickly. I surround myself with good people. I work for a great company. There are plenty of resources that I have at my disposal to be able to get these answers, and I believe that the same thing can be applied to a community government scenario for sure.
Thanks, Matt. George?
When you get asked a question in the military and you don't know the answer, your response will and should be, "I will find out and report back, sir." On that note, to echo what everybody else said, I don't claim to be an expert in everything by any stretch of the imagination. I might possibly be the youngest person in this room. Like Francine said, we have a lot of dedicated individuals on all the committees and boards in town, people that are invested in this community. If you want to ask me a question about something really obscure that maybe the zoning board knows, I will report back to you after I talk to them about it, because they are the ones that deal with it on a weekly basis, daily basis, whatever it may be. I think everybody up here isn't going to just blow smoke at everybody in this room. There are a lot of dedicated, smart individuals in town that know what they're talking about, and those are the people that you need to refer to. And if they don't have the answers, then there's other outside sources that we can get information from.
Thanks very much, George. The next question, we'll start with Francine. Do you feel the town is ready to handle the influx of students with all the new developments?
As far as I know, the school is not maxed out by any means, Norris School in particular we're talking about. My understanding is that enrollment may be down slightly, and that we may be in a position, should more people and more children come into the community, of perhaps having to turn away school choice students in favor of our own in order to make that accommodation. If that were ever, and hopefully, it depends on how large we want the town to grow. I'm sorry, I'm making noise here. How large we want the town to grow and how many children will be in the community. But honestly, I do feel that we could accommodate more, and if we can't, we have to make provisions for perhaps outplacing students in the interim while we develop plans to construct new facilities to accommodate more students.
Thanks, Francine. Move to Matt. Sure. Do you feel the town is ready to handle the influx of students with all the new developments?
Got it. So this is another question I'm not sure of the answer to, but here's what I do know. When you increase the number of students in a school, if you don't increase the number of teachers, what you end up with is increasing class size, which, there are studies out there that correlate increasing class size to decreased ability to be able to teach these students effectively and have them progress, according to, test scores and according to what, people are expecting. With that being said, there's also, so there's numerous things that are associated with this. I mean, we can even trickle it back to the override budget. which we're trying to vote for. And so whether or not the school is at capacity today in its current state, if that's true, then that's great. But let's hypothetically look at it from a day of tomorrow. If the override doesn't pass and we don't have as many teachers in the schools and the classroom sizes are in the high 20s, do we consider that at maximum capacity or not? And so I think that the budget plays a role in this. I think obviously the number of people that are moving into town play a role in this. And I think that the influx of people into town right now may very well be attributable to the fact that we do have a great school system in town. People do want to move into Southampton because we do have a great elementary school to support those children and those families. And I just would love to try to see that continue. So I'd love to see, more families move to town and attend a great elementary school. And I hope that we can continue to do that.
Thanks. Move to George.
Having worked with youth in various capacities over the past number of years, I'm really invested in education. I think it's something that our nation as a whole needs to get better on. And looking at our town, I can't say I have all the facts. I would really love to link up with the school boards, both of them, to look at our future. I do think that Norris is coming towards the peak end of their capacity, and like Matt mentioned, if we don't have the override, we're going to lose some people in that school. I do think that looking towards the future, if our growth does continue, I think our schools will absolutely get maxed out eventually, and we will have to look at, as Francine mentioned, potentially building another school, separating middle school out of Norris, taking the 2 bottom grades out of the regional, pulling them back into a local school. I do think it's something that needs a lot more work and looking into, because it is a real thing that our community faces in the next number of years.
Thank you. Charlie?
I've been watching the enrollment of the schools, and I haven't seen any dramatic spikes in anything in the last number of years. I mean, students graduate, new students come in. The town is growing, but it's not really growing in a phenomenal rate. It's a fast pace. It's a fast pace in this region. I've not had anyone from the school committees come forward to the select board or me privately and say, hey, in the next couple of years, we're going to have an issue here. The issue is staffing and the issue is budget, but the structures themselves, there hasn't been any discussion that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. The next question will start with Matt. What would you do differently from the existing board? It's always fun to have the first question, isn't it?
Isn't it? So, I mean, I've been observing the current board for the last 3 months. I think that everybody's heart's in the right place. I think that nobody's personally out to get anybody in the town. Everybody's trying to do the best that they can, and I plan to do similarly. I think if I were to say one thing that I would change, and I do feel that the board currently does this, is that what's hard with the board, I feel, just on observing, is that it's hard to get necessarily all of the facts and all of the data associated with the facts. You're often relying on a lot of people, and I feel that we do need to do that to some degree, but I also feel like we could do maybe a bit of a better job of double source verifying or looking at the hard data ourselves, and rather than just trusting the summary necessarily. And so I think that would be one of the main things that I would try to do a little bit differently, or at least support the board in doing. Like, I would bring that characteristic to the board if I were elected, is essentially double source verify, do some of the data analysis, double check some things, make sure that we have our facts correct, so that we can transparently convey that to the citizens of Southampton and make some good decisions.
Great, thank you. George?
I do first want to say I think the select board in town in general has gotten a lot of negative press maybe lately by all the fiscal responsibility that everybody throws around. I do think they have done a very good job. I do think going forward, along the lines of what Matt said, looking at more of the facts, bringing in other committees and boards, to more often to really get some of the expertise on certain subjects. I feel like I've seen a lot of things get shelved at meetings, and then we come back to it, another meeting, and it gets shelved again. And I think it's just a lack of having all the facts, and we don't want to make rash decisions, which I think is a great thing. I don't ever want a town select board or any type of governing body to just jump into something free will and not know what they're really doing. I would, if I was elected along the same lines as Matt again, I would take some more due diligence to really get into the nitty gritty of things, really looking into back to our master plan and sticking to that. I think we've strayed away a little bit over the past number of years. I think we've let some opportunities fall by the wayside. I would look more towards coming back to what we've decided as a community would be the best course of action for us in the long term.
Thank you. Well, Charlie?
You're asking the chair of the Board of Selectmen to explain what they could do better.
I'm not.
It's an interesting question. Being on the other side of the table, one of the things I think we need to use is that screen more. We need to take and project the documents and stuff we're going over so that not only the audience here, but the audience on television can see what we're actually discussing to get a better appreciation of the complexity of the topics. I don't mean when Art comes in with an 89-page document that we're going to project 89 pages up there, but there are materials that we can do that with. The other part to this is people have to appreciate the fact that for the last year, the town select board was relying on a half-time town administrator. We've just come out of the shadows with that, and things are getting better. So I think if you give this another 6 months or so, you're going to see it evolve to be even more precise and more accurate as it moves.
Thank you. Francine?
Okay. I'm a person who really prefers organization and structure because I feel that facilitates more communication and better understanding among and between. So what I would envision for the select board would be perhaps a little more horizontal management than vertical management. And by that I mean we now have a full-time experienced town administrator here, and some of those duties can be delegated to him so that we can focus a little more on the issues and probably less on the day-to-day operations of some of the silos and departments that are out there. And I'll go back to the fact that I look at those committees that are in existence and people that you elected to those committees, and I would go back and say, those are the people I would like to bring in closer for advice and counsel to the select board when we're making major decisions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And the last question, we'll start with George. I'm hoping, and I hope I can read it correctly. How would you handle it if you learn that one of the other select board members had a conflict of interest with some significant aspects of the town's master plan?
I think anytime that one might put themselves in a situation where there's conflict of interest, it needs to be addressed immediately. Going back to my previous experience in the military or even working in the youth field, you can't have a time when conflict of interest really occurs, because at the end of the day, that is going to hurt the whole body. Whether you're in a town capacity, whether you're in an organization, whether you're in a small group, anytime that there's behind the scenes interests being catered to other than the good of everyone, it's going to bring a negative fall to everything.
Okay, thank you. Charlie?
If the question's pertaining to you're a select board member and you feel another member may be in conflict, the first thing would be to advise that other member that you feel there's a conflict. If that other member does not take appropriate action, then the second thing is to contact the Ethics Commission to advise them, because you yourself become involved if you do no action.
Thanks. Francine?
Yes, I agree with Charlie. Bringing it to the person's attention, it would be hard for me to realize that a person wouldn't understand that perhaps they did have a conflict, but in the event that they don't envision themselves being in that situation, I think it would be a responsibility as a co-member of the select board to talk with that person and ask them to recuse themselves from certain situations and conversations and decision-making. And as Charlie said, if the person does not recuse themselves, then the next step and the only step, otherwise you're complicit. Otherwise, you'd have to report them to the Ethics Commission. Thank you.
Thanks. Matt?
Out of respect for time, I mean, I don't know as that I could add, and being the last person here answering this question, I'm not sure that there's anything additive to say about this. I mean, it seems common sense that I think most people would recuse themselves to begin with. I'd like to think that humanity is still in good standing here on the board and with the community as well. But if it didn't happen, then I would agree with Francine and Charlie and George, and that bring it up, address it directly. There's too much information out there. Nothing's hidden in today's society anymore, and take the appropriate procedure to make sure that it's completely above board and legal.
Thanks. We do have one more question that I had missed under my folder here, and we'll go back to Charlie for this one. What one or two different and specific management strategies would you actively fight to employ right away to address our town's significant financial challenges?
We need to take and have more accountability relative to the budget operation. We need to make sure that we are screening our revenue sources to make sure that the revenues that are coming in actually reflect what we are anticipating, and we need to take and evaluate our expenses in greater detail to determine if these expenses are all necessary or if some of them are just being done to anticipate a shortfall in the department that may not even occur.
Thanks. Francine?
Okay. Between the accounting department and the finance committee, I would conduct regular, thorough reviews of both revenue and expenses on a monthly basis. Anything that looked out of line, I would ask that they be reported directly and immediately to the select board for action to be taken. Everyone has to be accountable to maintain and live within the budget that they're given. And so not enforcing that accountability for department managers is doing a disservice for the town. So that would be my strategy, certainly making people accountable. There are going to be situations that are emergency situations, and that's everyone's problem. But the day-to-day operation for a budget to which that manager committed is certainly the budget that we need to hold them to. Thank you.
Thanks, Francine. We'll move over to Matt.
Yeah, so to reiterate, people absolutely need to stay within their budgets in town, and be held accountable to those things. And if for whatever reason the train has gone off the track in their individual department, then they need to raise their hand and make an appropriate discussion and bring appropriate facts to the table about why these things have happened, so that the town can transparently see this. With that being said, though, I do think that in each of the 5 major departments in town, we should take a very good hard look at everything that we're spending there, and maybe potentially take one step back and ask the question of, all of the services that we have today, do the facts support all of the money that we spend on these individual services? So each service costs a certain amount of money. Are we getting the derived benefit for all of that money? It's the same decision making that we all make in our homes when we want to buy something nice for ourselves, or when we want to do something in our house. Are we going to derive the benefit from that thing that we're going to get, or from whatever it is that we're going to spend our own money on? Are we going to derive the value from that we're anticipating? And I think we need to look at that in each of the town departments very closely, and we're going to need to use the data and the facts to support that. And I think that each of the town departments has hard data that can be examined and summarized to support each of their budgets.
Thanks. And George?
Obviously echoing everything that everybody just said, but I think accountability on frivolous spending, you've seen that some departments have come to town with, you know, requests for X, Y, and Z, and, you know, like everybody said already, is it looking at those things in depth? Is it really necessary? Is it something that needs to be right now? Is it an emergency situation where that department would fail without that piece of spending? So really looking at all expenses that come to the town's attention, and looking at if that's an emergency. Also, like Matt mentioned, really digging into the budget. I know we've done a lot of work over the past couple months looking at the upcoming fiscal year, and we've made a decision to take away a lot of line items. But going forward, looking at the situation we're in with the budget, is there any more we can do? Really getting in depth into the spending of each department and looking at, well, can we cut a little bit more here? Can we cut a little bit more here? It's something that just needs to happen because, you know, like we all mentioned earlier in the night, the override is a one-time thing. You know, we're not going to be able to fall back into the ways of, oh, we'll just add a little bit more to the budget this year. We got the extra money, because we're just going to find ourselves right back in the same situation.
Great, thank you very much. So now we'll go into the closing statements by the candidates. And if you'd be all right, we'll start with Charlie and go down as we did the opening statements.
Well, I've dedicated my entire free time of my life trying to serve the community. Been on many different boards, many different committees. As you can see, I'm actively involved in not just the select board. I'd appreciate your vote.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity this evening to tell you a little bit more about myself, my qualifications, and my efforts to contribute to the town and its well-being. As a resident of this community, I will work to maintain the same environment that I fell in love with when we moved here 10 years ago. My strengths are my energy, my enthusiasm, my honesty, and my dedication to things in which I believe. I believe in Southampton, and my work as a volunteer in town for the last 6 years is proof of my commitment to this community and its residents. People who have worked for me and would describe me as a person who is fair and someone who would never ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. I hope I can count on your vote to elect me as a member of the Select Board. I'm proud and honored to serve you. Thank you.
I am fully committed to the responsibilities of the Select Board and will execute those duties with the utmost integrity and transparency. My goal for the town is to establish and transparently execute a clear long-term strategy that allows for steady, balanced, and sustainable growth. Decisions will be made using data and multi-source verified facts. I hope you will consider voting for me on May 15th.
I am absolutely dedicated to the future of this town. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and those of you watching at home. I had a great time with everybody here, and I think we're all up here on the same mission to really further Southampton as a community. I would really appreciate your vote next week, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the polls.
Thanks very much. I'd like to thank all of our candidates for being with us tonight, and certainly want to remind everyone that Tuesday, May 15th is Election Day, and polls are open from noon to 8 p.m. So be sure to get out and vote. And thank you all for being with us, both here and on television. Have a great night.